I'm Brooke Williams, and I turned 30 last month, the day I discovered my own parents had emptied my savings account of $1.5 million. The money I'd worked 80-hour weeks to earn, invested carefully, and protected vigilantly, vanished in a single transaction. The notification hit my phone at 6:03 a.m. on my birthday. But what my parents didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this betrayal for years. Their perfect crime had one fatal flaw. They underestimated the daughter they raised. Before I share how I outmaneuvered my own parents, let me know where you're watching from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself. My childhood in Brookline, a middle-class suburb of Boston, looked perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style house, with its manicured lawn and my father's BMW in the driveway, projected the image of success that Gerald Williams demanded. My father built his identity around appearances and financial control. A mid-level executive at an insurance firm, Dad's actual income never matched his spending habits or social ambitions. My mother, Diana, a part-time real estate agent, followed his lead in every decision, financial or otherwise. Money wasn't just currency in our household, it was a weapon, a measuring stick, and the primary language of love. When I brought home straight A's, I received a $20 bill. When I disappointed them, privileges with monetary value were revoked. Dad constantly reminded me that in this family, we pay our debts and nothing in life comes free, Brooke. The first time I recognized something was wrong, I was 7. I'd received $50 from my grandmother for my birthday. That night, I overheard my parents arguing about an overdue credit card payment. The next morning, my birthday money had disappeared from my unicorn piggy bank. When I asked about it, Mom smiled tightly and said, "We're just keeping it safe for you, sweetie." I never saw that money again. By 12, I was keeping careful track of any money that came my way, hiding small amounts in a hollowed-out copy of Little Women on my bookshelf. I'd noticed that any visible money in my room seemed to evaporate, always with a different explanation. "We borrowed it for groceries," or "That's to cover your school trip," even when I knew the school trip had been paid months earlier. My 14th birthday brought another awakening. My father presented me with a spreadsheet titled Brooke's Debt Obligations. He'd meticulously calculated the cost of my dance lessons, school supplies, even the premium breakfast cereal I preferred. "We've invested so much in you," he explained, sliding the paper across the dinner table. "Once you start babysitting, you can begin to pay us back." I stared at the 5-figure sum in disbelief. "This is what it costs to raise a child," I said quietly. Dad's smile tightened. "This is what it costs to raise you, Brooke. You're expensive." Mom just stirred her coffee, eyes down. That night, I made 2 decisions that would shape my future. I would study finance to understand the systems my father used to control us, and I would become financially independent as quickly as possible. High school brought advanced placement economics classes and part-time jobs. I worked at the local library, then a coffee shop, then an office supply store, always keeping most of my earnings hidden from my parents. What they did know about, they demanded a portion of for room and board and college savings. I later discovered those college savings never existed. When I earned a partial scholarship to Boston University, my parents acted proud in public, but privately informed me they wouldn't contribute to the remainder of my tuition, as they'd previously promised. "We've helped you enough," Dad said. "If you want this, figure it out." I took out student loans and worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a 3.8 gigapascals in finance. During my junior year, Dad called asking for a loan of $2,000 for an investment opportunity. I refused. The screaming match that followed ended with him telling me I was ungrateful and selfish. Mom called the next day, crying about how I'd hurt his feelings and damaged the family. It was my first time standing my ground against their financial manipulation, and the guilt was overwhelming. But I didn't send the money. Graduation day should have been triumphant. Instead, as we posed for family photos, Dad whispered, "That degree cost us a fortune." I bit my tongue, knowing every penny had come from my scholarships, loans, and late nights serving drinks at the campus bar. I understood then that no achievement would ever be mine in their narrative. Everything would always be because of them, or in spite of them, but never simply mine. When I landed my first job at a boutique financial consulting firm in Boston, I signed the lease on a tiny studio apartment 40 minutes from my parents' house, close enough to visit occasionally, but far enough to establish boundaries. Mom cried about how I was abandoning them. Dad criticized the wasteful rent when I could live at home and save money. I smiled and handed them a houseplant as a gift at my apartment warming party of 4 friends. My starting salary of $65,000 felt like a fortune after years of scraping by. I created a detailed budget that allocated 60% of my post-tax income to loan repayment and savings. I ate ramen 3 nights a week. I took the bus instead of Ubers. I comparison shopped for everything. Slowly, my financial foundation began to build, brick by careful brick. Every time I achieved a milestone paying off a loan, reaching a savings target, making a successful investment, I learned not to share it with my parents. When I did, Dad would immediately have a sudden emergency or opportunity that required financial help. After falling for it twice, I established a new policy. I would listen and offer advice, but my money was off limits. This created a cold war of sorts. Dad would drop hints about their struggling mortgage or Mom's medical bills. I'd recommend financial counseling resources. They'd decline. The cycle repeated, with growing resentment on both sides. But I held firm, watching my savings grow month by month as I climbed the corporate ladder. By 25, I had fully repaid my student loans, built an emergency fund, and begun serious investing. My parents had no idea of my true financial situation, and I intended to keep it that way. My career trajectory after college surprised even me. The boutique consulting firm I joined specialized in wealth management for tech entrepreneurs. My analytical skills and straightforward communication style resonated with clients who appreciated someone who could translate complex financial concepts into actionable strategies. When I brought in 3 major clients in my second year, I received a promotion and a substantial raise. By 26, I was managing a small team and earning 6 figures. My investment strategy was diversified but aggressive. I lived well below my means and invested approximately 70% of my income across index funds, carefully selected growth stocks, and eventually, angel investments in startups founded by clients I believed in. One particularly successful investment was in a healthcare technology startup that revolutionized patient data management. My initial $50,000 stake, which represented most of my liquid savings at the time, grew to over $400,000 in 18 months when the company was acquired. That single investment accelerated my timeline dramatically. By 29, my investment portfolio had grown to just over $1.5 million. I lived in the same 1-bedroom apartment I'd moved to after my first promotion, drove a modest 5-year-old Honda, and continued to track every dollar. My colleagues teased me about being a millionaire with a Target wardrobe. I didn't care the growing number in my brokerage account represented something more valuable than luxury goods. It represented freedom. Throughout this period, my relationship with my parents remained complicated. We had holiday dinners and occasional weekend visits, during which they would inevitably probe my financial situation. I became adept at deflection, keeping conversations focused on my work achievements rather than my compensation or savings. Then, about 8 months before my 30th birthday, Mom called in tears. Dad had been experiencing chest pains and needed cardiac tests their insurance wouldn't fully cover. They were looking at potentially thousands in medical bills. "I know we haven't always been easy, Brooke," she said, her voice breaking, "but we're getting older now. Your father is too proud to ask, but we need help." I transferred $5,000 to their account that day, feeling a complex mix of obligation, compassion, and wariness. A month later, Dad called about setting up a joint family emergency fund. As we age, medical emergencies could come up quickly, he explained in an uncharacteristically gentle tone. "We should have a system where we can all access funds if needed. It would give your mother peace of mind." I consulted with my financial advisor and attorney before agreeing to establish a joint account with specific legal parameters. I funded it with $20,000, explaining it was all I could spare at the moment, a significant understatement. Over the next few months, my parents' interest in my finances intensified. Dad asked pointed questions about my investment strategy. Mom wondered if I was saving adequately for the future. During one Sunday dinner, I noticed Dad scrolling through my investment app when I left my phone on the table while helping Mom with dishes. My suspicions grew when they began mentioning their retirement dreams with increasing frequency: a condo in Florida, extensive European travel, a boat for Dad. These ambitions seemed disconnected from their financial reality, which I knew included a mortgage they had refinanced multiple times and substantial credit card debt. I began quietly investigating their financial situation through casual conversations with them and with family members. Aunt Jessica revealed they had approached her for a six-figure loan the previous year. My cousin mentioned Dad asking detailed questions about accessing retirement accounts early without penalties. The picture that emerged was alarming. My parents were underwater financially and looking for a lifeline. I realized with growing unease that their increasing interest in my finances might not be innocent. After careful consultation with my attorney, Rebecca Sanderson, I created what we came to call the TRAP account. Officially, it was a high-yield savings account with a balance that eventually grew to $1.5 million. My parents' names were on the account, but with critical restrictions they weren't fully aware of. First, any withdrawal over $1,000 required notification to all parties, with a mandatory 72-hour processing period. Second, all transactions were recorded with IP addresses and device information. Third, and most importantly, the account had specific legal provisions regarding intent and authorization that Rebecca had carefully crafted based on my parents' history of financial manipulation. Simultaneously, I established a separate emergency fund in an account unknown to my parents, containing roughly 30% of my actual net worth. As my 30th birthday approached, the red flags multiplied. Mom and Dad suddenly paid off their car loans and credit cards. They put a deposit on a Florida condo. Dad retired 2 years earlier than planned, explaining they had come into some resources. When I asked directly about their financial situation, they were evasive but upbeat. "Don't worry about us, sweetie," Mom said with an uncharacteristic wink. "We've got everything figured out." 3 days before my birthday, they called to cancel our planned celebration dinner, citing a last-minute investment opportunity that required their attention. That night, I called Rebecca. "They're going to make a move," I told her. "Soon." She reassured me our preparations were solid. "If they try anything, they'll trigger the trap. Just keep acting normal and be ready." I didn't know then how soon the trap would spring. My 30th birthday dawned clear and cool, a perfect Boston spring morning. I woke early, as was my habit, stretching as golden light filtered through my bedroom blinds. I had taken the day off work, my first personal day in months, planning to treat myself to brunch and a massage before meeting friends for dinner. My phone buzzed at 6:03 a.m. Expecting birthday wishes, I smiled as I reached for it. Instead, the screen displayed a series of automated alerts from my bank. Unusual account activity detected. Large transaction alert. Withdrawal confirmation. Fully awake now, I sat up and opened my banking app with suddenly trembling fingers. The transaction history for the joint account appeared, topped by a single line that stopped my breath. Withdrawal: $1,500,000. Transfer to account ending 8,214, 5:58 and 42 seconds. AM. My vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I blinked hard, certain I was misreading the numbers, but the screen remained unchanged when my vision cleared. $1.5 million. My entire Mind savings account. Gone. A cold weight settled in my stomach as I navigated to the transfer details. The receiving account belonged to Gerald and Diana Williams. My parents had emptied the account. My first coherent thought was simple disbelief. There must be some mistake, some technical glitch. They wouldn't actually do this, not even. They would go this far. I called my father's cell phone. No answer. My mother's. Straight to voicemail. Their home phone disconnected. My hands shook so badly, I had to put the phone down on my nightstand. I focused on breathing 4 counts in, 4 counts out, a technique from the therapist I'd started seeing to help process my complicated family dynamics. When I could think clearly again, I checked my email. There it was, the automated notification that should have given me 72 hours warning about the large withdrawal, sent at 5:55 a.m. They had found a way to override the waiting period. I called the bank's emergency line and spoke with a confused representative who confirmed the transaction had been authorized using proper credentials and security measures. When I explained it was unauthorized, she put me on hold to consult with the fraud department. While waiting, a text message arrived from a number I didn't recognize. We've decided to secure our retirement. You're young and can earn it back. Do not contact us for a while. Love, Mom and Dad. The words blurred as tears finally came, hot and angry. I had anticipated something like this might happen, had taken precautions, but the reality of their betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, not prey on me. In retrospect, all the signs had been there. Their sudden interest in my investment strategy, the Florida condo deposit, Dad's retirement, the canceled birthday dinner. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The bank representative returned to the line. Miss Williams, the withdrawal appears to be legally authorized since both your parents are named on the account. However, given the amount and circumstances, we can initiate an investigation. I should warn you that the funds have already been transferred. I thanked her with a steady voice that surprised me and ended the call. Then I did what I had prepared to do. I called Rebecca. They did it, I said when she answered. They took everything from the trap account. There was no surprise in her voice. I'm on my way to the office. Meet me there in an hour. Bring your laptop and phone. Don't contact them again. I showered mechanically, dressed in a crisp black suit that felt like armor, and packed my documentation in a leather portfolio. As I drove to Rebecca's office, I cycled through emotions, devastation, rage, vindication that my suspicions had been correct, and finally, a cold, clear resolve. My parents had taught me many lessons about money throughout my life. Now it was time to teach them one, that actions have consequences. At the law office, Rebecca was already reviewing the transaction logs. They accessed the account at 5:47 a.m. from an IP address in Florida, she said, looking up as I entered. They used your father's credentials but bypassed the waiting period by calling the bank directly and claiming an emergency situation. They're in Florida already? Rebecca nodded. According to this, yes. Likely at the condo they recently purchased. With my money. The words tasted bitter. With what they thought was your money, she corrected, allowing herself a small, grim smile. Let's activate the response plan. For the next 3 hours, we methodically executed the contingency plan we had developed. Rebecca sent formal legal notifications to the bank, triggering the special provisions in the account agreement. I filed a police report for theft and fraud, providing the documentation we had gathered over months. We contacted the Florida authorities to put a freeze on their newly established accounts. At noon, my phone rang. My father's number. Rebecca nodded, put it on speaker. I answered with a simple, "Hello, Dad." Brooke. His voice was jovial, confident. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Did you get our message? About stealing $1.5 million from me?" "Yes, I got it." A brief pause. "That's a harsh way to put it. We're your parents. We gave you everything, your education, your opportunities. This is just securing our future after all we've done for you. I paid for my own education. I earned every opportunity through hard work. And what you've done is theft, Dad, legally and morally." He chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "Sweetheart, your name is on the account, but so are ours. It's a family account, completely legal." "Actually," I said, "you might want to review the account agreement more carefully, particularly sections 12 through 15 regarding conditional authorization and fraudulent intent." A longer pause. "What are you talking about?" "The trap you just walked into," I said quietly. "Every conversation we've had about that account was recorded with your knowledge, Remember those disclosure forms you signed? Every text, every email where you discussed your plans has been documented. The account was structured specifically to catch you if you tried exactly what you just did. I heard muffled conversation, then my mother's voice. Brooke, honey, you're overreacting. We were going to discuss this with you. We just needed to secure the funds first because we were worried you might be irresponsible with so much money at your age. Mom, I built that money from nothing. While you and Dad were refinancing your house for the third time and maxing out credit cards, I was saving 70% of my income. Does that sound irresponsible to you? You don't understand the pressures of— I understand exactly what's happening, I interrupted, and so will the judge. The funds have already been frozen, and criminal charges are being prepared. You have exactly one opportunity to transfer the money back, resign from the account, and work with me on a repayment plan for the thousands you've already spent on the condo and whatever else. You would send your own parents to jail? My father's voice had lost its confidence, replaced by indignant disbelief. You would steal your daughter's life savings? I countered. On her birthday? If you do this, you're no longer our daughter, he threatened, voice shaking with rage. I felt a strange calm settle over me. That's your choice to make. Mine is to hold you accountable. You have 24 hours to return the funds before we proceed with full charges. I ended the call as my father began another tirade. Rebecca placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. You did well, she said. Now we wait. On my 30th birthday, instead of celebrating with cake and champagne, I sat in a law office watching the clock tick down on my relationship with my parents. It wasn't how I had imagined marking this milestone, but perhaps it was fitting a clean break from the past as I entered a new decade. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please don't do this to us. We love you. We just wanted security in our old age. I didn't respond. Love doesn't empty your child's bank account. Love doesn't justify theft. Some lessons can only be taught through consequences. The next morning, I met again with Rebecca to fully implement what we had privately called Operation Accountability. She spread documents across her mahogany conference table as I sipped black coffee, running on adrenaline after a mostly sleepless night. Let me walk you through exactly what they've triggered, Rebecca said, her tone professional but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. She had spent months helping me construct this safety net, and now it was performing exactly as designed. The trap account, as we called it, appeared to be a standard high-yield savings account with joint ownership. However, embedded in the 20-page agreement my parents had signed, after Rebecca insisted on reviewing it with them personally to ensure legal compliance, were several critical protections. First, while all three of us were technically owners, the account had asymmetrical withdrawal rights. Since I had contributed 100% of the funds, any withdrawal by my parents without my explicit written consent would be classified as a disputed transaction requiring review. Second, the agreement contained what Rebecca called a bad faith clause. If evidence existed that an account holder planned to make unauthorized withdrawals or misrepresented their intentions, additional legal remedies became available beyond standard banking protections. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the account agreement established specific legal jurisdiction in Massachusetts rather than Florida, where banking laws more strongly favored the original depositor in disputes. The paperwork they signed included acknowledgement of recording financial discussions related to the account, Rebecca continued, highlighting a particularly clever section. Every time your father called asking about your finances while you were in Massachusetts, that two-party consent recording became legally admissible evidence of intent. She pulled up the digital evidence package we had been building, recorded phone conversations where my father discussed accessing Brooke's money when they thought I couldn't hear, emails between my parents discussing their retirement plans that specifically mentioned using my savings, text messages about the joint account that revealed their true intentions. The emergency override they used to bypass the 72-hour waiting period is particularly problematic for them, Rebecca noted. They claimed medical emergency to the bank representative, which is demonstrably false based on their Florida location and subsequent actions. That's textbook fraud. My phone rang Aunt Jessica, my mother's younger sister. Brooke, "What the hell is going on?" she asked without preamble. "Diana just called me hysterical, saying you're trying to put them in jail? Over some family money dispute?" I took a deep breath. "They emptied my entire savings account, Jess. $1.5 million. Yesterday, on my birthday." Silence then. "Holy shit. Yeah. And this was your money? Not family money they were holding for you or something?" "Every dollar earned from my salary and investments over the last 8 years. They added themselves to the account by convincing me we needed a family emergency fund." She exhaled loudly. "God damn it, Diana. I knew Gerald was capable of this, but I thought she had limits. Apparently not. What are you going to do?" "I've given them 24 hours to return everything and step away from my finances forever. After that, fraud charges, civil lawsuits, whatever it takes." Another pause. "You know they're calling everyone in the family saying you've gone crazy? That you're trying to steal their retirement savings because you're jealous of their success?" I laughed, despite myself. "Their success? They've remortgaged their house 3 times. Dad's been fired twice for ethical violations he covered up. They're drowning in debt, or they were until yesterday." "I believe you," Aunt Jessica said firmly. "Your cousin Matthew said they tried to get him to invest in some sketchy timeshare scheme last year, and they asked me for $70,000 18 months ago for a business opportunity they would never explain." "I didn't know that. I didn't tell you because it was embarrassing. I assumed it was just Gerald being Gerald. I never thought they'd do this to their own daughter." After ending the call, I turned back to Rebecca. "They're spinning a narrative to the family that I'm the villain here." She nodded, unsurprised. "Classic Darvo deny. Attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's textbook behavior when manipulators get caught. The good news is, courts don't care about family gossip. They care about evidence, which we have in abundance." At precisely 5:58 a.m. the next day, exactly 24 hours after their original theft, my phone buzzed with a banking alert. A transaction was processing. $1,500,000. Transfer from account ending 8,214. Minutes later, my father called. "The money will be back in your account by noon," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Are you satisfied now?" "This isn't about satisfaction, Dad. It's about consequences." "We are your parents," he exploded. "Everything you have is because of us. Your entire existence is my own," I interrupted calmly. "And so is my money." "So, what happens now?" His tone shifted to something almost plaintive. "You've humiliated us, threatened us with jail, frozen our accounts. Is this how you treat family?" "I'm not the one who stole $1.5 million. It wasn't stealing. It was reallocation. We raised you. We deserved." "Parents don't deserve their children's money, Dad. That's not how it works." After he hung up, Rebecca called with confirmation that the full amount was being returned. The bank had added additional security measures to my accounts, and we had already begun the process of removing my parents' access to any of my financial information. But the war wasn't over. My parents had revealed who they truly were, people willing to betray their own daughter for money. The legal battle had been won, but the emotional fallout was just beginning. That afternoon, I received a tearful call from my mother. "We never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. "We just thought, with so much money, you wouldn't miss it. We've struggled for so long, Brooke. Your father's medical bills, the house repairs. Mom, I would have helped you if you'd been honest. I have helped you thousands of dollars over the years, no questions asked. But you tried to take everything." "It was your father's idea," she whispered. "He said you owed us for all the sacrifices, and you went along with it, like always." Her voice hardened slightly. "You don't understand marriage, Brooke. Sometimes you make compromises. Stealing isn't a compromise, Mom. It's a crime." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment looking at the family photos I still displayed on my bookshelf. Smiling faces hiding decades of manipulation and control. I carefully placed them in a box and put it in my closet. Some ties needed to be loosened, even if they couldn't yet be fully severed. The trap had worked. The money was being returned. But the greater revelation was one of character, both theirs and mine. They had shown what they were willing to do for money, and I had shown I was no longer their victim. Despite returning the money, my parents didn't surrender quietly. 2 weeks after the failed theft, I received notice that they had hired Gregory Westfield, a prominent Florida attorney specializing in family financial disputes. They were contesting my fraud claims and filing a countersuit alleging I had manipulated elderly parents through complex financial instruments they couldn't reasonably understand. Rebecca was unfazed when I forwarded her the legal notice. "This is actually good news," she said during our emergency meeting. "It means they're scared. They know we have them dead to rights on the fraud charges, so they're trying to flip the narrative. My father worked in finance for 30 years, and my mother is a real estate agent," I pointed out. "They understand contracts perfectly well." "Exactly. And we have video of the signing where Rebecca explicitly reviews the key provisions with them. They acknowledged understanding on camera." She tapped her laptop. "Their strategy is desperate, which means they know they're vulnerable." The first court appearance was scheduled for June 15, Massachusetts, where a judge would determine jurisdiction for the case. My parents' attorney argued that since they now resided in Florida, the case should be heard there. Rebecca countered with the explicit jurisdiction clause in the account agreement and evidence that the account had been established in Massachusetts with a Massachusetts bank. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Eleanor Harmon, reviewed the documents carefully before looking up. "The account agreement clearly specifies Massachusetts jurisdiction, which both defendants acknowledged in writing," she stated. "The motion to transfer to Florida courts is denied. Additionally, I'm issuing a continued freeze on the defendant's assets pending resolution of the fraud allegations, which appear substantial based on the evidence presented." My father's face flushed deep red as he whispered furiously to his attorney. My mother wouldn't look at me at all, her gaze fixed on her tightly clasped hands. As we left the courthouse, reporters from the Boston Globe and a local TV station approached us. The case had begun attracting attention. Wealthy parents stealing from their millionaire daughter made for compelling headlines. Rebecca handled the press with practiced ease, making brief, factual statements while I maintained a dignified silence. The publicity created unexpected ripple effects. Distant relatives called to express shock or take sides. Former colleagues of my father contacted me with stories of ethical corners cut, clients misled, funds misappropriated. My mother's real estate office quietly removed her profile from their website, distancing themselves from the scandal. Most painful was my grandmother's call. At 87, my father's mother was the family matriarch, a woman I had always respected and loved. "Brooke, darling," she began, her voice frailer than I remembered. "This situation with your parents, it's tearing the family apart. Couldn't you find it in your heart to forgive them? They're not young anymore. Your father's health isn't good." I closed my eyes, fighting tears. "Grandma, they tried to take everything I've worked for. They planned it for months. They executed it on my birthday. They showed no remorse until they got caught. Family is more important than money, dear. This isn't about money. It's about trust, about respect, about recognizing that I'm a person, not a resource to be drained." She was quiet for a long moment. "I raised your father to be better than this," she finally said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I don't know where I went wrong." "It's not your fault, Grandma. Will you at least consider dropping the criminal charges? The civil suit, I understand. But prison? For your own parents?" The weight of her plea hung heavy in my chest. I had been wrestling with this same question for weeks. Did I want my parents to face potential jail time? Did anyone deserve that for a financial crime where the money had ultimately been returned? "I'll think about it," I promised. "That's all I can say right now." After hanging up, I called Aunt Jessica, who had become an unexpected ally throughout the ordeal. "Am I being too harsh?" I asked after explaining my grandmother's call. "Honey, they tried to steal your life's work," she replied firmly. "If anyone else had done it, would you be questioning whether to press charges? No, but they're family, which makes the betrayal worse, not better. Look, I love my sister, but Diana has enabled Gerald's schemes for 30 years. Maybe facing real consequences is exactly what they both need. As the case progressed, my parents' defense strategy evolved. When evidence made it impossible to deny their intentions, they pivoted to justification. Their legal filings now acknowledged the withdrawal, but framed it as recovery of parental investment in their daughter's success. During depositions, my father claimed that his financial support during my childhood and early adulthood constituted an implied investment agreement. My mother tearfully testified that they had only taken what they felt entitled to after sacrificing everything for Brooke's success. Rebecca systematically dismantled these arguments with documentation of my student loans, work history, and evidence that I had financially supported them in recent years, rather than the reverse. She also introduced the damning recorded conversations where they had explicitly discussed taking my money without permission. The stress began affecting my professional life. Clients noticed my distraction during meetings. Colleagues whispered when I passed in hallways. My boss, Martin Fitzgerald, called me into his office after I missed a key deadline. "Brooke, I understand you're going through hell right now," he said with unexpected gentleness. "The firm supports you, but we need to discuss how to manage your workload during this period." I nodded, embarrassed. "I'm sorry about the Lancaster presentation. It won't happen again." "That's not what I'm saying." He leaned forward. "We want to temporarily reassign some of your accounts. Not as punishment, as support. You're one of our best, Brooke. We want you to have the space to handle this situation properly." His kindness nearly broke me. I had been so focused on appearing strong, on not letting the situation affect my work, that I hadn't acknowledged how much it was draining me. "Thank you," I managed. "That would help." With my workload reduced, I finally had time to process the emotional trauma with my therapist, Dr. Melissa Chen. Our sessions became a crucial anchor in the storm. "You're mourning," she observed during one particularly difficult session. "Not just the money they tried to take, but the parents you thought you had." "I always knew they were difficult," I admitted. "Controlling, manipulative with money, but I never thought they would do something like this." "Sometimes the most painful betrayals come from seeing someone clearly for the first time," she said gently. "You're grieving the relationship you wished you had, not the one you actually had." As summer turned to fall, the legal proceedings reached a critical juncture. The evidence against my parents was overwhelming, and their attorney approached Rebecca about a potential settlement. Their offer: they would acknowledge wrongdoing in the civil case, agree to financial restitution for legal fees and emotional damages, and accept a permanent legal barrier from accessing any of my financial accounts or information. In exchange, I would drop the criminal charges that could result in jail time. Rebecca presented the offer without recommendation. "This is entirely your decision, Brooke. We have a strong case either way. If you want to proceed with criminal charges, we have ample evidence for conviction. If you accept this settlement, they face significant consequences, but avoid incarceration." I took the weekend to consider. I consulted Dr. Chen, Aunt Jessica, and finally, my grandmother. "They broke the law," I said to her during our call. "They betrayed my trust in the worst possible way." "Yes," she agreed, surprising me. "What they did was unforgivable. But forgiveness isn't about what they deserve, dear. It's about what kind of person you choose to be." Her words stayed with me as I made my decision. On a crisp October morning, we gathered in Judge Harmon's chambers for the settlement hearing. My parents looked diminished somehow, my father, without his usual commanding presence, my mother's face lined with stress I hadn't noticed before. Their attorney stood stiffly beside them, documents in hand. The settlement terms were read into record: full acknowledgement of attempted theft and fraud, payment of my legal fees totaling just over $87,000, additional damages of $150,000, permanent legal barriers preventing them from accessing my financial information or accounts, mandatory financial counseling, and a structured repayment plan for the money they had already spent from the theft, approximately $42,000, on the Florida condo deposit and various luxury purchases. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges that could have resulted in up to 7 years of imprisonment. Judge Harmon reviewed the agreement carefully before addressing my parents directly. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, do you understand that this settlement includes a formal admission of attempting to defraud your daughter of $1.5 million? My father cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. And do you understand that violation of any terms, including the financial barriers or repayment schedule, will result in immediate reinstatement of criminal charges? We do, my mother answered quietly. The judge turned to me. Miss Williams, are you entering this agreement voluntarily and without coercion? I am, Your Honor. Very well. She signed the document with a decisive stroke. This court approves the settlement as outlined. The case is resolved according to these terms. With the bang of her gavel, 8 months of legal battles ended. I felt hollow rather than victorious as we exited the courtroom. Outside, away from the attorneys, my mother approached me hesitantly. Brooke, thank you for not sending us to prison. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had stood by silently throughout my childhood as my father weaponized money against me. The woman who had helped plan to empty my account. The woman who had given birth to me, read me bedtime stories, and then betrayed me in the most fundamental way. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it because I don't want to carry the weight of your incarceration. That doesn't mean I forgive what you did. My father stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he simply nodded, once acknowledgement, without apology. The consequences of their actions extended far beyond the legal settlement. Their carefully cultivated social standing collapsed as news of the case spread through their circles. My father's former colleagues distanced themselves. My mother's real estate clients disappeared. They had to sell their Massachusetts house to cover the settlement and their legal fees, downsizing from their 4-bedroom colonial to a modest 2-bedroom condo in a less prestigious Florida community. The Florida dream home they had planned to purchase with my money remained out of reach. Instead, they faced years of financial reconstruction under the court-mandated counseling program. 2 weeks after the settlement, I received a letter from my mother, handwritten, tear-stained in places. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for the account, but for every time I stayed silent when I should have protected you. When Gerald suggested taking your money, I knew it was wrong. I told myself it was just rebalancing, that you'd never miss it with how successful you've become. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was a coward. I have been for 30 years, she continued, explaining how she had finally begun therapy separately from my father. How she was, at 63, learning to find her own voice. How she hoped, someday, to earn back some small measure of my trust, though she understood it might never happen. My father sent no such letter. Through Aunt Jessica, I learned that the settlement had created a seismic shift in my parents' marriage. For the first time, my mother was standing up to my father, setting boundaries, questioning his decisions. They remained together, but the power dynamic had fundamentally changed. She told him she'd leave if he didn't get help for his financial obsession, Jessica reported during one of our now regular Sunday calls. I nearly fell off my chair. I've never heard Diana threaten anything in 40 years of knowing her. As for me, the resolution brought complex emotions rather than simple relief. I maintained minimal, structured contact with my parents' monthly emails, occasional cards on major holidays. I established clear boundaries. I would communicate, but trust would have to be rebuilt incrementally, if ever. The experience transformed my relationship with the rest of the family as well. Some relatives couldn't understand why I had pursued the case so aggressively against my own parents. Others expressed support and shared their own stories of financial manipulation by my father over the years. Family gatherings became complicated diplomatic negotiations of who would attend if others were present. Professionally, I emerged with a new reputation, not just as a skilled financial consultant, but as someone with unshakable ethical boundaries. Ironically, the publicity around the case brought new clients seeking someone they could truly trust with their wealth. 6 months after the settlement, I purchased my first home, a beautiful brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. As I signed the closing documents, I felt a sense of security that transcended the financial. This was mine, earned through my work, protected by my vigilance, untainted by manipulation or control. I invited Aunt Jessica, my grandmother, and a few close friends to my housewarming party. My parents were not on the guest list. "To new beginnings," Jessica toasted, raising her glass in the sunlit kitchen of my new home. New beginnings indeed, but built on hard lessons from the past. 1 year after the settlement, I sat on the terrace of my brownstone, watching the autumn leaves drift onto Commonwealth Avenue below. So much had changed in 12 months, not just circumstances, but something fundamental within me. The therapy sessions with Dr. Chen had evolved from crisis management to deeper healing work. We had excavated the foundations of my relationship with money, identifying how my parents' manipulation had shaped my own tendencies toward hypervigilance and control. "Money represents security for you in a way that's both healthy and problematic," she observed during one session. "You're excellent at managing it, but the emotional weight you assign to financial security is disproportionate." She was right. Even with well over $1 million secured in diversified investments, I still checked my accounts multiple times daily. I still felt waves of anxiety when making large purchases. I still kept emergency cash in a fireproof safe in my closet. "Your parents created an environment where financial security was constantly threatened," Dr. Chen explained. "Your brain learned that money equals safety, and that safety could be revoked at any moment. Those neural pathways don't disappear just because your logical mind knows you're secure now." Gradually, I developed healthier patterns. I programmed my banking apps to allow checks only once daily. I established an enjoyment fund specifically for spending without guilt. I practiced mindfulness techniques when financial anxiety surfaced. Professionally, the experience catalyzed an unexpected transformation. After careful consideration, I left my consulting position to establish Williams Financial Protection, a boutique firm specializing in helping clients, particularly women and young adults from wealthy families, establish financial independence and protection. "Financial abuse doesn't just happen in poor families," I explained in my business plan. "It happens across all socioeconomic levels, often disguised as family financial planning or wealth management. My firm will specialize in creating transparent, ethical structures that honor both family connections and individual autonomy." Within 6 months, we had a waiting list of clients referred by attorneys, therapists, and domestic violence organizations. My team grew to include not just financial experts, but also a staff therapist specializing in financial trauma and an educational coordinator who developed workshops for clients and community organizations. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve along carefully maintained boundaries. My mother's therapy progress seemed genuine. Her emails became less manipulative, more accountable. She respected my communication limits without complaint. For Christmas, she sent a simple card with a handwritten note. "Thinking of you with love. Proud of the business you're building. Here if and when you want to talk." My father was a different story. His initial emails vacillated between terse civility and passive-aggressive jabs about family loyalty. When I maintained my boundaries without engaging in his attempts at emotional manipulation, he eventually settled into formal, infrequent communications, birthday acknowledgments, holiday greetings, the occasional comment about weather or local news. Never an apology, never an acknowledgement of the harm he had caused. Through Aunt Jessica, I learned that he was struggling with the diminished lifestyle the settlement had forced upon them. The Florida condo was smaller than he had envisioned. His golf club membership had been downgraded. Former colleagues no longer returned his calls. His identity, built on financial status and control, had crumbled. "He's showing signs of depression," Jessica reported. "Diana is trying to get him into therapy, but he refuses. Says there's nothing wrong with him that getting their old life back wouldn't fix." I felt compassion for him but maintained my distance. His healing was his responsibility, not mine. My mother made the effort to fly to Boston for a carefully planned lunch when I agreed to see her in person for the first time since the court hearing. We met at a neutral restaurant, both of us nervous. "You look well," she said, studying my face. "The business must be thriving." "It is. We're helping a lot of people," She nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. I've been reading about financial abuse. Your father and I. What we did to you throughout your childhood. Not just the account. It fits the pattern. The acknowledgement stunned me. I had expected deflection, not insight. Yes, I said simply. It does. I'm so sorry, Brooke. Not just for what we took, but for what we never gave you: unconditional love, security, trust. She twisted her napkin in her hands. I'm learning how to be a better person. I know it doesn't erase the past. No, it doesn't, I agreed. But it means something that you're trying. The lunch was awkward but civil. We didn't discuss reuniting for holidays or regular visits. We didn't pretend one meal could bridge the chasm of betrayal. But it was a beginning of a new, more honest relationship, one based on reality, rather than manipulation and pretense. My personal life blossomed as well during this year of healing. I had been so focused on career and financial security that relationships had always taken a back seat. Now, with stronger boundaries and clearer understanding of healthy connections, I opened myself to deeper friendships and, eventually, romance. Ryan Parker entered my life unexpectedly through a charity fundraiser for financial literacy. A corporate attorney specializing in whistleblower protections, he understood boundary setting and ethical fortitude on a level few others could. Our first date stretched from coffee to dinner to midnight walks along the Charles River as we discovered shared values beneath different experiences. Financial transparency is non-negotiable for me, I told him early on, explaining my history in broad strokes. He nodded thoughtfully. That makes complete sense. I had a college girlfriend whose parents monitored her every purchase and withheld tuition when she chose the wrong classes. I saw what that control did to her. His understanding came without the pity or sensationalism I'd encountered from others when they learned about my case. With Ryan, I could discuss the situation factually, without it defining me in his eyes. As our relationship deepened, we established clear financial boundaries that respected both our independence and our connection. We split dating expenses equitably. We discussed financial values and goals openly. When we eventually moved in together, we created a transparent system for shared expenses while maintaining separate investments and savings. This is the healthiest approach to money I've ever experienced in a relationship, Ryan commented, as we finalized our cohabitation agreement. No games, no power plays, just clarity and respect. My work with clients continually reinforced the lessons from my own experience. I saw patterns of financial control in wealthy families that mirrored my own childhood parents, using money to dictate career choices, relationship decisions, even geographic location. I helped young adults establish independence while navigating complex family dynamics. I guided divorcees in securing their financial futures after years of having partners manage their money. Every client's success strengthened my conviction that financial autonomy was fundamental to personal freedom and that it could be achieved without sacrificing loving family connections. The trap my parents had fallen into wasn't about money itself, but about using money as a tool for control rather than support. On the anniversary of the settlement, I received an unexpected email from my father, the first he had initiated outside of obligatory holiday messages. "I've been seeing someone," he wrote. "A therapist, I mean," Diana insisted. I thought it was nonsense, but I'm learning things about myself I didn't want to see, about how my father treated me, about how I treated you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just letting you know I'm trying to understand what went wrong, what I did wrong. It wasn't an apology, but it was more accountability than I had ever expected from him. I replied simply, "Thank you for telling me. That takes courage." As I reflect on the journey from that devastating birthday morning to today, I realize the trap I set wasn't just about protecting my money. It was about breaking a generational cycle of financial manipulation. It was about establishing that I wasn't just an extension of my parents' ambitions or a resource for their comfort, but an independent person worthy of respect and autonomy. The wounds haven't fully healed, perhaps they never will completely, but they've transformed into something useful. Wisdom I can share, boundaries I can maintain, Compassion I can extend to others walking similar paths. I still check my bank accounts more often than necessary. I still feel that flutter of anxiety when unexpected financial issues arise. But I also know my worth isn't measured in dollars. My security comes not just from financial resources, but from self-trust, clear boundaries, and authentic relationships. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter isn't about money management or legal protections, though those are certainly important. It's that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is hold others accountable, even when it hurts. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. That healing doesn't erase scars, but gives them meaning. If you're facing financial manipulation from family members, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic relationships. Have you ever had to establish financial boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about financial empowerment and healing from family trauma. Remember, protecting yourself isn't just your right, it's your responsibility. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your own financial journey be guided by both wisdom and compassion.